Tell everyone that when the day is out, we shall have a wedding or a hanging. Either way, we're going to have a lot of fun. Huh? Are you not entertained? In other words, welcome to the Fluffenhammer. Roll the music! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. And if anybody manages to pass out where that cold open came from, you get a shiny, shiny penny. Well done, you. As always, I am Gruffy, and I'm here once more to hold you by the hand as we take on some form of roller coaster of nonsense that is the Fluffenhammer. Today, though, I am not alone. Well, I say I'm not alone. I've put Andy and George into a box, I've mailed them off to Abu Dhabi, and I'm going to see if they can find their way home. It's time for them to stand on their own 2 feet, or in this case, tentacles. With me today, though, I have a special guest who's come in all the way from Australia to talk about things that are grim, things that are dark, and things that are grimdark. And also, very likely, things I'll have to cut out because I don't want other people to have blackmail material on me. Hello, Adrian. How are you doing, fella?
G'day, good morning. How you doing?
This time difference thing has messed with my head so many times. It's like I'm up later than I'm normally up. It's morning for you. What? That? Am I in a DeLorean? Am I traveling at 88 miles an hour? I don't understand.
Yeah, I can appreciate it, mate. It's it can do your head in. I mean, I work with guys in the UK where I'm finishing my day and I'm like, right, it's time for a beer, and they're going, hey, do you want to have a morning call? I'm like, champion, it's not morning.
I work nights, so my work day starts around about 4 to 5 o'clock, and the amount of times I've got like emails saying, can we have a meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? No, you cannot. No. I'm getting in after midnight. There's no way in hell I'm going to be up and rearing and able to think by 9 o'clock in the morning. Nope. But anyhow, we're not here to talk about work. What we're going to talk about, of course, is, it's Adrian himself. Adrian, who are you? And how have I managed to corral you into appearing on my bizarre little corner of the internet?
Well, after a series of, I guess we call them time zone mishaps, and me being getting a bit soft in my old age and struggling with a couple of back-to-back colds, we're finally getting to have a chin wag, which is great. I run Grimdark Magazine, which is how we've been introduced. I'm a pretty average bloke from Sydney, Australia, and yeah, just kicked off an e-zine nearly. Gee, it's going to be about 9 years ago now, and yeah, it will be. And here we are. Yeah, it's been a hot minute.
I don't think I ever actually said in the conversations we've been having, but I think I've been reading it for about 6 years.
Oh wow! Thank you.
And I love it. It's good stuff. If there's one thing I enjoy doing, it's learning stuff that I don't know about and being able to find all sorts of weird books. I mean, thanks to you guys, I discovered Anna Stevenson, and now have this weird, terrified Twitter relationship where I'm scared to like say anything to her in case she responds back with really nice things. Because I wrote a review for the first of the Mongol Hollow Gormgast, no, the Warhammer horror book that she did. And unbidden, she came out of nowhere and just sent me a really nice message saying how nice it was to read the review. And of course, my brain just went, I've read about your books for years. I cannot compute. Too scared to respond.
Oh, Anna's lovely. She's well worth a chat, mate. You should always respond.
Well, that's one of my ambitions in life, is to try and get her onto the show, because she is. Every book that I've found of hers has been absolutely astonishing.
Well, you know what? I'm yet to meet the author that hates talking to people who love their books. I'm sure they exist, but I'm pretty sure Anna isn't one of them.
I don't know. I'm sure the Melvin Peak was just somewhere, just whittling steaks, waiting for somebody to knock on his door to ask to come in. Lovecraft hated talking to his audience.
Okay, fair. Yep, fair. He was an odd character though.
Yeah, that's true. The man was. Yeah, I've got a 3-hour show all about Lovecraft's life. If you're interested in H.P. Lovecraft, please go listen to that one.
I have to admit, and there are probably some people on my own team who'll throw a brick at me for this, but I've never read a word of H.P. Lovecraft. There's been no point where I've been like, I need to read this stuff. It's quite the hole in my literary learning, I feel.
It is and it isn't. Lovecraft is one of those things where it's worth reading to see where a lot of this stuff starts. Like, for example, without Lovecraft, Stephen King wouldn't have the voice that he started with, which evolved into the voice he ended up with. And it's an interesting slice of how horror was viewed in that time and how horror was created in that time. You know, Lovecraft took a lot of Edgar Allan Poe and then mixed it in with the urban expansion that was happening in his time. And what you get is something that is very... It's interesting, actually. You said that you haven't read a word of Lovecraft, and there's thing where you will never read a word of Lovecraft because the man will not use a word when 7 will suffice. So a better way of putting it be, I've never read a sentence of Lovecraft because you get the same amount of information.
Yeah.
He's worth a read just to see and understand what he did. But on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff in there which you read and just the shiver of cold goes down your spine as you just go, oh dear.
Yeah, I've heard he's has a lot of very problematic commentary, but he did spawn a lot of not spawn, but he did contribute to the the lexicon of people like Stephen King. So he obviously has one of those people that has intrinsic value to to a range of genres and subgenres. Well, from what I've heard, because I haven't really invested much time in reading his work or about him. Bit of an average person.
Yeah, I mean the man. I actually find as I've got older, the man himself a lot more fascinating than his work. I'm not going to get into that because if I do, we'll be here for 7 to 8 days.
Yeah, I'm also completely unread on it, so it would be a one-sided conversation.
And that's no fun. However, though, Brian Conley, yeah, it's I can't remember how we got here now. Back up the ladder we go. Yeah, it was a really weird experience just having Anna Stevenson send a message that was like, thank you. Me just going, oh God, the fear. Going back up the ladder again. Yes, 6 years I've been reading Grimdark Magazine. This will happen a lot. Yeah, I will not apologize.
That's okay. Mate, I appreciate it. Sticking with a magazine for 6 years is something I massively appreciate. That's what, God, my times tables are horrible. 6 times 4, 24 issues. And I can't say how much I appreciate the support. Our entire magazine, is not read by a colossal amount of people, in each year, you're talking thousands, not tens of thousands or anything like that. So, everyone that actually takes the time to not only purchase and support us through Patreon so we can, forward plan our issues and make sure that we can afford to pay authors a reasonable income for their words, means a lot.
Yeah, it's really cool. It was my brother actually that got me into it because I wouldn't even think how long he's been reading it. Longer than I have, because it was him who dumped a couple of issues and went, read this. I was like, oh, I was asleep.
Well,
Thank you.
A very high five to your brother.
I'll never tell him that.
It's a
where
good
did
thing
it,
there's no evidence in this conversation.
yes, it's a wonderful thing, technology, when it fails, as I just start smashing the thing with the lump hammer. Where does Grimdark Magazine... My God, that wasn't even English. Where did Grimdark Magazine start? Where did the idea of just going, I'm going to create an e-magazine solely based in this one... I don't want to say this one genre, because it's an overlapping series of genres that all stick together, but where does the spear tip come from that got you going on it?
Okay, so I suppose where it came from, and this is going to sound pure early author. I'm not being appreciated for how good I am. Hubris was I was writing short stories, and I just couldn't sell them. And having just gotten back into fantasy through Joe Abercrombie, naturally I was one of the 10,000 writers at the time trying to mimic his voice and trying to mimic that awesomeness that he just oozes in his books, and that is remarkably harder to create, is remarkably hard to recreate. And so anyway, so it got to a point where I was sitting there, and because like I said, we're talking 10 years ago, so we're talking about a bloke in his late 20s. I was sitting there feeling rather unappreciated for my efforts, and I kind of went, right, I can either sit here and keep moaning about it, or I can do something about it. And so I kind of looked around at the market of other short fiction and just went, for the stuff that I like reading and writing, and to be clear, the intention was never to publish myself. Where the thought process went is that maybe there just isn't really a market focused on this niche. And so I read around, I looked at other magazines, realized very quickly, had one of those coming to whatever religion you believe in moments where I was like, actually, I'm not that good. But I did realize that there didn't really seem to be, there were horror magazines, there were dark fantasy magazines, there were all this stuff, but they all felt like quite, I guess, general and broad spectrum. Yeah. And it just so happened I was sitting down with my mate Adam, and he had kicked off a bit of a side hustle. He
sounds like he's got the best name ever.
Yeah, great blokes. Adams, they're all fantastic. And I sat down with Adam over a beer, and he kind of said, "Look, I've just kicked off this side hustle of helping small businesses start up, and I've got this methodology mapping out your business. And he's like, would you like to just get in a room for an afternoon and just map it out, map out something on a whiteboard? Because I've been kind of umming and ahhing about what can I do with publishing and what can I do apart from what I was doing for a day job at the time." And then from that conversation, GDM was born. Had a chat with my partner, now thankfully my wife, 9 years of this, where I kind of just said, look, I want to do this, but I want to pay people. I don't want to be one of those magazines that pays exposure or begs stuff free, that sort of deal. So I went, okay, I will build, also right out of our quarterly, or out of my quarterly pay, I will allocate this amount of money to paying for this many stories and this amount for cover art. And I just pretty much just took it from there, and it's just grown over time, predominantly because I be a stubborn prick and I just kind of didn't ever want to let it go. And all those times where I was like, right, that's the line for failure, and when I reached that line, I couldn't stop. I waved that line as it went past so many times, and then over time, for 4 or 5 years, it got to a point where it started paying for itself, and it became a cost-effective kind of hobby or thing that I enjoyed doing. And then it just has grown really, really quickly in the last 3 to 4 years. We kind of up for the website to make announcements, to using the website to review books, write books, to have conversations with authors, publishers, artists, designers, and that's where our ethics started back in 2016. I gave some boosts as well. So yeah, it's growing over time. All this time, it's been commonplace. Like, it's really fun.
And it sounds like it all just kind of built and built and built and built, and then all of a sudden you got this almost like a floodgates open. Probably not a floodgate is the wrong word, but definitely a flood of new people coming in. Would that be so about 2019 or so, 2018, 2019?
Yeah, so 2016, the Kickstarter really put us on the map. So Evil as a matter of perspective really put us on the map with a lot more people than we previously had. But we had a problem for about 2 years, and that problem was an Adrian-shaped bottleneck for everything we were trying to do. I only had so much time in life, naturally. I had, the amount of times that my wonderfully understanding partner and fiance and wife at the time, the amount of conversations where she'd sit me down and be like, Adrian, you've barely spoken to me for 3 days. And I'd just go, shit, is it Thursday? And I'd have to kind of try to, it just basically came to a realization around 2018 or so that I was actually the problem. Because I had big dreams, but I didn't trust anyone to really help me develop those big dreams. So at about that point, I think about 2018, 2019, a guy called James, we'd been chatting for a while, and then James and I had a chinwag, and he was just like, you've got to, look at say the Tor.coms and stuff like that, and start emulating that content first website to help market your publishing site. And I was just like, all right. So we kind of kicked that off, and I started trusting somebody to help me grow that side. And in fairness, historically I had trusted Mike with the editing. A guy called Mike Myers is a wonderful editor. Had trusted him with that, so I did have trust in some people, but not trust in actually handing major things over to people to run. And so over the course of after meeting James, we grew. The web content went from like 20,000 hits a year to exploding out to 30, 40, 50,000 hits a month relatively quickly.
Wow.
And then from there, I realized that, actually GDM, if I broke it into sections and I found people I could trust to take ownership of those sections, and naturally I had to find people, because I think I've said it many times, GDM is not even predominantly, it is a volunteer organization. I don't get paid. The guys who run, Beth, who runs the magazine now, that was a huge step for me to give her the magazine control. That she doesn't get paid. Fabienne, who makes sure that we get all these advanced reader copies from publishers, she doesn't get paid. Carrie, who does a lot of the loading of content to the website from our review team, she doesn't get paid. So the people who are actually leading and running these major sections of GDM, they are all really, really just passionate about growing something collectively together. And do I hope one day that we'll get to a point where I can just say, hey guys, I'd love to pay a salary for a day, a week of your time, which is approximately what they put in, and be able to pay them. I can't wait to get to that point. In publishing, the margin's so skinny that it's very difficult to do that and grow at the same time. Yeah, but
absolutely.
There's no point doing this if you're not going to dream big, really, is there?
No, absolutely not. I mean, at the moment, to go back a little bit, about November last year, I decided I wanted to write a game. Something I've wanted to do for years, but my internal monologue has always kind of stopped me from getting started. So I just went, sod it, I'm going to do it. I wrote a skirmish game and put it out through the website end of last year, beginning of this year. And now at the moment, I'm trying to work out how to self-publish it, so it's coming out as a hardback cover. I'm learning quite a lot from this. It's like, when I started this, I didn't know how to put I didn't know how to put a page together when I started this. So it's like, I think I've taken about 4 years off my life in the space of 8 months. It's been absolutely insane.
Mate, I wish I could tell you that it gets better, but you will definitely not make the same screw ups more than 2 or 3 times, but you will 100% find new ways to screw up, and and new ways to be screwed over by your vendors. For example, we've done reprints in GDM since I'm pretty sure issue 2. We've been doing reprints, so approximately for 9 years. And Amazon's AI kind of scanner that checks to make sure that you're not plagiarizing other people's stuff when you publish it and that sort of jam, has decided this quarter is the quarter that they are going to start demanding that I send through contracts for every reprint that we put in. So it's so it's like I said, every time you think I have this down pat, you're like, great, we've got this issue produced early, we'll get the pre-order up, it's going to be fantastic, and then you get a notification that your pre-order can't go up until you evidence some the replication of these works, because naturally those stories appeared in other fiction magazines and anthologies before we grabbed them as reprints. And then Amazon says they'll take 5 days to get back to you to give you some very nondescript explanations of why and what they're trying to achieve. So I assure you, if you're hoping that one day it's just going to be all rainbows and fuzzy bunnies, it is an ongoing string of frustration that you definitely need to love the overarching gig to offset.
I think so, and I love the act of creation. I love getting creative. I love making something. I love it when a project comes together and something clicks and it's all done. It's there, and it's something that is probably the greatest passion in my life. Be it through doing these podcasts, be it through sitting with green stuff and sculpting, be it writing. It is like the best feeling in the world when it clicks. But when you get these little hurdles, when you get these giant flaming volcanoes that appear out of nowhere with a fire god dancing around them and laughing and pointing, the frustration gets high. But once you've got past that frustration, the feeling of, fuck you, fire demon, is such a real nice feeling.
It is. And I feel like a lot of the people in our community are, I guess, very similar to you and I, in that you have, you tend to have this creative streak that for some reason in, authors and artists and publishers and podcasters and narrators and actors, I assume, and there's a range of people where for some reason I feel like that creative streak that comes with probably most human beings just seems to be really pushed to the fore and seems to matter a lot.
That's right. It becomes a vocation. That's, I think, the way of looking at it. You get a lot of creative people out there who can kind of switch it on and off, and fucking hell, I'm jealous of them. But then over the years I've done stuff like this, I found there's a lot of people out there who, I'm not the only one, who have this tidal wave of creativity, and the act of creating is just as important as having a creation at the end of it.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like right now, I've got Discord up on my main screen, and then on my laptop I'm looking at an artwork for an upcoming cover of our first novella that we're releasing. So, I look at that, and you can just like map out all the stuff that has to happen between that raw piece of art by an artist called his name's Carlos Diaz, excellent artist. So between that and what, holding a book in my hands and what that feels like, I know there are a lot of steps, but I love those steps, and I find those steps fun and enjoyable. And, I can't wait to hear from Sean King, our designer, on his ideas on how he's going to use his typography to really make this, this art pop and, help this whole thing come off the shelf at potential buyers. So, as you can hear, I love this stuff, and honestly, I wouldn't be here 9 years down the track if I didn't love the process, despite how much I sometimes hate it.
I think that's the hate. I think the hate goes hand in hand, though, doesn't it? it's not a hate of the creation that you do in the being creative. It's the hate of the frustrations that get in the way of being creative, and it's as much as they're always going to be there. You have to kind of learn to not love them, but definitely not suplex old women in the street out of sheer frustration because they got in your way after a difficult morning. Honestly, please don't do that. That would get me into a lot of trouble.
I try not to. I try not to.
I mean, a superplex is fine, but just don't do a suplex. Yeah, that's two very different things. But yeah, you kind of have to find a way to take it in your stride, or else it'll put thorns in your path, and those thorns will make things really hard to continue to love doing it. There's the saying, isn't there, of do what you love and you never work for a day. You'll never work in a day. And that's not entirely true, because by doing something that you love as a vocation, as a main not source of income, but like as a main place for your brain to go to work on things, it can poison it a little bit by being difficult, by having to do every single part of the layer rather than just doing the fun bit that you enjoy doing. That's where a lot of things fall down when people get that initial excitement and get going and start running, and then they start hitting the hurdles, and that's when things kind of peter out. And it's very important to remind yourself that you don't have to be a marathon runner here. You know, it doesn't have to be a sprint. You can take your time, learn how to navigate these hurdles as they start popping up.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're I think when you're quite a creative person, you get so bloody excited for people to see what you've created that you rush things, and
yes,
you forget that you can ask for help. And and there are definitely I know it's a touchy subject, but there's definitely privilege, and I recognize I have it. I'm privileged to live in a country like Australia where I'm afforded a great many opportunities. I'm privileged to have found a very good career that actually allows me to make a decent amount of money with writing, and creativity is one of its central one of its central requirements. And I'm privileged that in my life, I can just sit there and say, this quarter I'm just gonna chuck $1,000 this quarter at creating a magazine, and not have to be like, well, do I feed my children, or do I do this thing that I just want to do because I want to do it. I think that there are definitely a range of places that people can get help, and people can get advice, and people can talk to other people that have tried and messed up, and hopefully like in the act of publishing, whatever it is, if it's a game book, if it's a print novel, if it's a short story that's only going up as an e-book, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to screw up. And if someone can help you avoid the first 3 mistakes that they made, and you just go make the next 7, I think that's a bonus and a benefit, whether you get that help for free, or you get it through investing in a friendship, or you pay someone. And everyone who's just heard me say that, there are a lot of dodgy people out there, so make sure your recommendations are via word of mouth and not via some random Facebook ad about publishing services.
Absolutely, yeah. If there was ever a piece of advice that anybody would ever take from me, it would always be ignore every Facebook advert. Just every single one of them. No, they're not people.
No,
they're things.
No, get into an author group, and I would highly recommend the Grimdark readers, Grimdark fiction readers and writers Facebook group. Just to be clear, that's not my group. That was started by 2 blokes, Rob Matheny and Phil Overby, and it's currently run by Phil and his team of brilliant administrators. It is a wonderful space for people who love reading and writing and publishing, fantasy and sci-fi as well. But the great thing about it is that there are a lot of both traditionally published hybrid authors and really quite successful fantasy authors in that group. And so if you're ever, if you're looking to publish and you're looking to publish in the SFF space, I would highly recommend getting in there and just like scrolling through and looking at the conversations by some of those people, because they can really help you avoid a lot of pain.
Absolutely, that's really cool. It's I shouldn't be surprised by the fact that there are still good Facebook groups, but I always am. It's always nice to hear that there's still Facebook groups out there.
I completely appreciate that. Well, because most of them are, like, to be honest, most of them are utter trash. Like, especially with the ones that aren't very well moderated, and all you see is just this long, never-ending list of really like 4-second effort buy my book posts, and if that's all you see, just reverse out of that group immediately. But Grimdark Fiction Readers and Writers is really well moderated. Phil and his team just do such a good job of keeping that an enjoyable space to be in. It's one of the few places, it's that and a couple of craft beer groups, if I'm honest, that I still visit on Facebook, because the rest just doesn't really seem like a valuable use of my time at this stage in life.
Yeah. I've got a theory. The old 50s B movies where the aliens came down and they were always like, you humans have created the atomic bomb too early. You are not allowed to travel through space. I've got a firm belief that nowadays, once you come down and just go, you idiots created social media far too early. You're not ready for it. Stop it.
Probably. Yeah, it's a... I don't know. I remember when Facebook first, when I first got into the reading and writing community, it was a space where people did pretty well on Facebook. They did well with their ads, and I guess the rise of Facebook has just meant that the small advertiser and that sort of stuff just hasn't worked out, and the sheer volume of people getting onto that platform has kind of just meant that it's there's just too much wash and not enough value in there, I think, unless you really focus on those groups that bring value, like that one I mentioned before.
Absolutely. I think it's a really hard lesson to learn that Facebook advertising doesn't work. Not unless you're a big... No, absolutely not. But what does work is being able to get people to recommend the things that you do through word of mouth. I've always said, since the Fluffenhammer began, we have been incredibly lucky. I've had to get the Banhammer out twice in nearly 8 years now.
That's not bad.
It. No, it's really good. The community that we've managed to build around the stuff that me, George, and Andy have done, whether it be the YouTube community, which is more like dramatic readings of stuff, to the Facebook, which is more people working on models and talking about lore and silliness, to the shows, which basically is a mixture of us loving tabletop gaming and fantasy and running off in all sorts of directions depending on what we're feeling at that evening. There's a long-running joke at the moment that how long does it get for us to actually introduce ourselves after the tangent begats another tangent begats another tangent. There's an episode out there where it took us 45 minutes to say who we were because we got into Robert E. Howard and just talked about Robert E. Howard for 45 minutes. Went, oh yeah, we're recording a show. We should really get on to doing some of the stuff.
But I bet those are probably the more popular episodes, the ones where people feel like they're almost sitting with you three at the pub enjoying a chinwag.
One of the reviews that we've got says it's like sitting in a pub and hearing another conversation on another table, and you become less interested in the conversation on your table and more interested into theirs. It's like,
I love it. I love it.
You, my friend, have exactly got who we are as people.
I think that's fantastic, and as I was saying to you before, like due to my day job, I know that if when people feel like they're a part of or listening into a conversation versus an interview or a presentation, it just changes the dynamic of the listener, really.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been podcasting since 2008. He says ? before he turns into a big ball of sand and flies away in the wind. Jesus, which makes me an old man in podcasting terms. And when I first started out, one of the things I did try to do was, interviews, and I quickly came to the conclusion I don't like interviews. They're not.
Yeah.
You might get information from them, but they're just no fun. You start talking to somebody, you get a much better idea of what they are, who they are, what they're into, what they'll enjoy, and you get to have a laugh, which it's just much more important to me to sit down and just enjoy someone's company.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool way to look at it. And I think, like, from the written perspective, on Grimdark Magazine, we used to do quite formulaic, interviews where we'd ask the questions like, "What does Grimdark mean to you?" And "What do you think about the impact of Grimdark on this, that, and the other?" And there were obviously questions particular to their books and stuff like that. But I think you could see that around the time Beth Tabler came on board, she started asking. She started showing me the value of doing a lot of research into the author as a person, so that you're not just asking them the exact same questions that 40 other outlets have asked them. And she would get some fascinating responses. And then, I kind of suggested that we get into the habit of maybe only asking 5 or 6 questions up front, and then asking 3 or 4 follow-up questions, and doing like 2 or 3 phase interviews, so that when they went back and forth, even though it was a written format interview, it felt more like a big conversational and riffing off responses that interested you. And I think that naturally in conversation you can do that to a many degrees higher than you can in written form. But yeah, I think that there is so much value to driving that conversational approach.
Absolutely. I think a lot of it comes down to understanding that the person you're talking to is a person, which can get lost if you become too enamored with a subject or an item. It's what I call the Pratchett effect, where a lot of Discworld stuff that got put out there, it kind of creates an idea in a lot of people's head about who Terry Pratchett was as a person, and you kind of forget that he was a person. He becomes more conceptual. But you got to also remember the guy was a guy. He had a life. He dug up some star metal and made a sword out of it. And it's...
Really?
Oh, God, yeah. Pratchett
That's
the person...
so cool.
Oh, Terry Pratchett the person is more amazing than you might actually think he is. It's incredible what that guy did. He got knighted, and the first thing he thought was, well, a knight needs a sword. So he got some star metal, learned how to smelt, built himself a foundry, and made himself a star metal sword.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that's really neat. I did not know that.
It's just one of those things, isn't it? Yeah. And it's something that you lose by becoming enamored with his work. You kind of miss the person, and the person, of course, informs the work, and thus is more interesting than the work itself. Not to say that the Discworld series isn't like the most formative thing that I ever came across in my life, because it is, but you've got to remember that there was a person behind it, and that person was more important than the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one when you kind of look at the juxtaposition between that, being you look into that author and it actually seems like a relatively amazing bloke from everything that you've said and the other stuff that I've heard over the years. But then you look into other authors, and sometimes the human being behind the works that you enjoy is sometimes not such a fantastic human.
No.
And it can definitely have the opposite effect on on your enjoyment of that work, and sort of it brings up that whole discussion of the artist behind the work, and what sort of leeway do you give them, or do you give Pratchett's books extra enjoyment because that the guy is a top bloke. It's a hard question, but from an interview perspective, which was I guess the context of what we're talking about, I can definitely see that you've got to focus on the human being more interesting than the actual work itself.
I mean, we can get into a conversation about, do you have to separate art from the artist? I mean, it's a heavy one. I'm not saying we should, but
it's a rough one, because I've always asked, like, where do you draw the line? And there are definitely a bunch of authors out there who just needed to never find social media or something like that, because they've just turned out to be horrid people when they've been given a voice, and and that sort of stuff. But there's definitely, I think, one of the things I love about Grimdark is that every evil is always a matter of perspective, right? So for every great evil that Western society views and says that person was the worst thing that ever happened to the planet, there might be a society or a subgroup or a single person sitting beside that great evil, just looking up at that person going, this is the greatest person to have ever lived and has had a wonderful impact on my life. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel like life is never black and white as much as we would love it to be.
No, and it's a really interesting thing. There is no person in history who would ever see themselves as being evil. There are people who would see themselves as being necessary, or see themselves as being, should we just say, for tough, and just leave it at that. But the human condition will not allow you to see yourself as evil. They might see acts that you do as evil acts, but you yourself will never be able to view yourself as evil, which creates a really interesting idea when it comes to fiction. How do you write a villainous character who doesn't see themselves as evil but commits evil acts? And I know that we were kind of veering towards the ice creaking on dangerous real life territory, so I'm just going to skid it back in a little bit towards fiction. And it's a tough one, because the mustache twirling Saturday morning villain is always going to be a lot of fun to write, but ends up being very two-dimensional and you can't really do much with him. Have you ever read any Michael Marshall Smith?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so there's a book he wrote called One of Us, and it's probably the best version of evil in fiction I've ever come across, because it's evil born of love. And I'm being very careful not to spoil anything here. What I'm saying is, go read that goddamn book, because that book is it's majestic in what it manages to accomplish by having a couple of realities all running at the same time. There's no way I can explain it without ruining it. There's a town full of cats, and it's always clean, for example. It's incredible stuff. But he manages to create evil that exists because that person was loved. And it's something I've never seen anywhere else. I've never seen in any other form of fiction. And it's stuck in my brain for 20 years. I'll go back to that book once a year just to reread it, and then have a sense of impending dread when you get into the last third of the book, because I know what's coming, and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this again.
I'm gonna have to check that out. You'll have to, because I have a horrible memory. You have to ping me after this and let me know the title, and I'll
he wrote
I'll
two.
just grab it on Kindle and give it a read.
Absolutely, he wrote 2 books in a cyberpunk with bunny ears genre, but they're not cyberpunk. That might be horror, but they're also funny as hell. I don't know what you'd classify them as other than jaw-droppingly amazing. They're really good.
It sounds like I'll definitely have to at least check out the first one.
Yeah. Can't recommend them enough. Yeah. But anyway, the point there was that evil is a very hard thing to pin down and make subjective. Is what I was trying to say there. Is one man's, as you say, one man's evil is another man's hero. And I think in the current climate that the world finds itself in, there are heroes and villains running side by side, and it's very hard at times to see which is which, especially when you have things like social media, when you have the 24-hour news cycle, and it gets very, very difficult to see past the muddy waters that all this creates. That's the point I think I was trying to aim for.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the 24-hour news cycle and social media has definitely exacerbated how much you get shown and how much you see and how much you get misinformed in particular. But I think, that kind of evil as a matter of perspective has always been, it links to me directly to that term that has been throughout human history that, history is written by the victors. So the victors get to wipe out all the horrible things they did to the losers, and they get to pretend that they didn't happen. They get to not teach, their behaviors and some of the worst things they did to other human beings in schools, and over the generations we forget about the horrible things that we did in order to secure an outcome that suited our society. But we often forget that the other side of the coin is that an entire opposite society with all their own hopes and dreams and wants and drivers were absolutely crushed and destroyed and painted as evil. So, I think that to me has always been something I've been fascinated by. Dad was a history teacher, so when I was moving away from children's books and learning to read more grown-up stuff, I just had this huge shelf of World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, all that sort of history, and it's always an interesting thing. I think that I'm not sure if it's the generation I'm in, so I'm in my late 30s at the moment, so I'm not sure if it's my generation or if it's the next generation or the generation after that, but we seem to be becoming a lot more honest with ourselves in digging up some of the things we've done to each other over history and saying, you know what, it is okay to admit that your forefathers did something quite horrible. It's okay to look at that and be like, we're not a perfect society. We have done terrible things, and it's okay to have discussions and to own that kind of stuff. And it's not a permanent black mark against you as a society. It's an opportunity, if anything, to try to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think that telling those kinds of stories is one of the things that drove me towards one of the things that I suppose when I picked up Joe Abercrombie's book when I was in an airport, I think in my early 20s, and might have been a bit later, I can't remember, and I picked up a book that had a really cool cover because I needed something to do on the plane. And that kind of perspective that he drives into his stories is kind of resonated really well with that kind of where I came from and what I was reading when I was growing up, and having discussions with my dad about where I was a young man who thought war was awesome and it was really cool, and Dad would sit me down and be like, let me tell you a couple stories there, champ, and he'd kind of help me realize that it's actually not cool, and it's not fun, and it's not glorious, it's horrible. But it's horrible for both sides.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, both my grandparents were in the Second World War. One was in the tanks, and the other was a bridge builder in Africa. And both of them had horrendous tales. Neither of them honeyed up the conversations about what they did in the war and the things they saw and the atrocities that they experienced. Obviously, they didn't go full hell for leather to like a 5-year-old. It's like, well, decapitations. Yeah. But at no point did they glorify it. And I think that's very much what has given me my my ongoing paranoia about war, which is probably a healthy thing to have. But it very much changes how you see a lot of things, I think, and how you react to it. And as time's gone by and we've lost more and more of the generation that fought in the Second World War, I think we kind of lose a bit of the weight of it. And that weight, it kind of makes it a bit more, not mythical, but it takes it out of fact and makes it into something that you can't really pin down. It muddies the water, it turns it into smoke that you can't quite get your hands on.
And I think that's where a lot of where cinema really really holds a lot of its value. And I know that a lot of war movies do glorify the act, and they do just want to make turn a war movie into an action flick, and that's fine as well. There's people enjoy watching that. There's a market for it. Awesome. But I think that there is importance to movies such as Saving Private Ryan or The Thin Red Line that really focus on the human being and what it means when somebody, when some idiot politician who's barely ever been out of Sydney says, oh, we should just invade or we should just take over. It's like you don't understand what you're talking about, you flippant dickhead. Like and when you flip that around and you turn that from Australia's meager 27 million population, and you have politicians with the US's population or the Chinese government's population or the Russian population start making these flippant comments about, oh, we'll just invade, or we'll just flick the switch on some missiles. Like it's such a I just don't think it's just such a major thing. And I realise, I've just brought the conversation down quite significantly.
No,
sorry, mate.
I think that's all right. I think it's a conversation with a lot of weight. It's certainly like a fascinating conversation to have, in all honesty. I think that something that's just occurred to me there, which has never really popped into my brain before, but over the last couple of years, we are seeing more war films that are trying to be realistic. They're trying. Obviously, they're still going to be Hollywoodized, but they're moving away from war is fun and moving it back into war is hell. I'm just thinking of like Dunkirk and stuff like that. That is a tense experience, and if you can walk out of that film and still be able to feel your neck, then you're not taking the lessons from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that film does really well is it does give you that heightened sense of tension, that constant feeling of being switched on. And then you go, right, now, you need to mentally extrapolate that out across, say, the soldiers in Vietnam who had to go do a month in the jungle and feel like that 24/7 for a month. And, and then they had to come back and fit into a normal society and try and pretend like they were okay. There are repercussions to that. And I felt like Dunkirk gave you that tiny little, 3 hours or 2.5 hour feeling of like just abject ongoing tension. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's a very valuable thing to be able to experience in your entertainment. It's a lot of what we'd classify as movies have stayed in the light and fluffy area for a very long time now. Even the stuff that's the R-rated, meant to be grim and unrelenting, it is still very fluffy by being basically a expansion of what Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing in the 80s, but without the sense of fun, the tongue-in-cheek that those films had. And having something like Dunkirk pop up as a tentpole, it is important to be able to remind people you don't have to be laughing with your entertainment. You can be learning, you can be uncomfortable, you can struggle with it. It's something that I think that gets forgotten a lot in all forms of media, that it doesn't have to be light, fluffy, turn your brain off. It can be something that you engage with on a deeper and weightier level.
And definitely, and the historical significance of movies like Dunkirk, of the World War One that was released, was it last year or the year before, that had that amazing trench scene in it?
Yes.
British soldiers. What was that?
Well,
anyway, the movie I was talking about. But movies like that, Saving Private Ryan, Thin Red Line, all those sorts of things. I think that if we're moving into a phase where it's harder and harder. Oh, and also Peter Jackson's colorization of World War One as well, which if you have not watched is phenomenal.
It is it is like nothing else I've ever experienced. That is, because it made it real. It made it extremely real. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, it did, and that I think was, you know, when you see, and I know a lot of the movement on those faces is created by technology because there just wasn't that much video back then. But when you see the look on a lot of those soldiers' faces, and you can see that they all think it's going to be over by that Christmas, and then the next year they all think it's going to be over by the Christmas after. And right at the start of the war, they all thought this was going to be the last war, the last chance to do something amazing to etch their names in the history of humankind. And the greater majority of those faces from especially the early people that signed up, so many of them just ended as a footnote in history where one or two families will remember who they are. There'll be maybe there'll be a commemorative heirloom like I have of my granddad sitting there on the wall with a photo of them from a newspaper, that one day was, talking about the people that they lost and the things that had happened, and the next day was probably starting people's fires or, being packed into walls as insulation or something. Like, it is really astonishing to watch that kind of stuff and the realization throughout the years as everyone realized that this is the worst thing humankind's ever done to each other. It was, and then to think that we went and did it again is just mind-boggling. And I think, to get back to the original point, is that I think it's in cinema, especially in today's very visual of media, cinema plays a really important part in making sure that we try to at least remember that it's just not a light thing to pull the trigger.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a theory that it takes 3 generations for a person to be forgotten. And that's not that long in historical terms. And we're kind of at that point now with the Second World War, so it does fall to the documentary makers, the movie makers, the writers, to be able to keep that in the public eye,
and the history teachers.
And history teachers, absolutely. This is going to sound really horrible, but I watched a documentary on Nanking end of last year, because I knew basically what had happened there, but I didn't know the full extent of it. So I was, all right, time to learn. And oh God, that I wasn't prepared for just how awful that got. That was difficult. But because it's difficult doesn't mean that you should shy away from it. The old saying, learn from history or you're doomed to repeat it. And it's very, very true.
It's pretty amazing. I think, I remember one day I was trying to make a point to somebody, and I can't remember who I was arguing with or why I thought it was important at the time. It was definitely on Facebook in some random comment section that I was having this argument, much to my shame. But I looked up who suffered the most casualties in World War II. And naturally, because I grew up in Australia, and Australia is an English vassal or colony, and we followed the English and we followed the Americans into pretty much every conflict that's been fought since the end of the 18th century, or end of the 19th century. And I found it really fascinating to find out that the largest casualties happened in China.
Yeah.
And we would bear, and I'm sure there's a moment where I read it in a textbook and I just skipped past it because it just didn't stick in my head. But it's not, when I was young, it just wasn't really taught that the Chinese were a part of the war and that 20 million of them died in World War II at the hands of Japan.
Yeah.
And then, it was very, I don't know, I just found that very interesting. I may have actually been having an argument about someone pointing out how evil China was, and I was saying, that it was only one lifetime ago that we were allied to them and not to Japan and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, sorry, tangent again, but yeah.
That's what we do here. I didn't expect the conversation to go here, but once again...
Yeah, sorry, mate.
Conversations... Don't have to apologise at all. It's always... Whatever the conversation ends up being is the conversation that's worth having at that time. And it is just how naturally these things unfold, and that's perfect. That's fine. It's all good. I am aware though that we're kind of running out of time. Okay, then. So a quick whiplash turnaround. Then hold on to your seatbelts because we're going to spin this car right round. Let's get a little bit of what Grimdark's entire ethos is. I think that's going to be a good way of kind of seeing us out from this point on. What is the ethos that you had at the beginning of this, and has that ethos managed to stick with the magazine? Have you managed to keep the arrow flying, so to speak?
Yeah, I think we've managed to keep the magazine on point with essentially with what started as my interpretation of what it was, and ended with very large discussions around what our interpretation of it became. But in the end, it's always kind of been about the anti-hero. It's been about finding a grim story told in a dark world by a morally grey protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been about evil as a matter of perspective. That's been a favourite saying of mine for a very long time. And it's really just, it's really just about showcasing that humanity right now is approximately 6.5 billion perspectives on this world and how things work within it. And that is what I think Grimdark is. It's not the violence porn. It's not it's not objectifying women or sexual violence. Some of one of my favorite stories that I've published in Grimdark Magazine did not have a skerrick of violence in it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a story about a woman who was a medic and a bit of a corrupt personality, and by trying to do something that was good, she ended up doing something quite evil. And those are the kinds of stories that we want. And yes, quite often the stories do have violence in them, and that's just part of I think the dark fantasy aspect and what people want to read about. And if I'm being honest, what I enjoy reading about. But realistically, the central nugget of everything we do is trying to find those characters that aren't squeaky clean. They're not two-dimensional. They are a bit dodgy, because if we're all being honest, as human beings, we're all a bit dodgy in someone's eyes. And those are the stories that we want to highlight, and those are the stories that we want to focus on. We actually have a few academics who are part of our team, and they're currently working on a bit more of an academic piece around what we interpret Grimdark to be, that we're going to put out as cornerstone content hopefully in the next month or two. So
that'll be cool.
That's a big piece of work for us to try and create that central content piece, because I guarantee you, if you go into the Grimdark Fiction readers and writers group and you ask all 7,000 people what they think Grimdark is, you'll get 7,000 nuanced stances about how they interpret it. And I'm definitely not pretending that we're going to put out this article and everyone's going to go, right, that's our rallying flag, that's exactly what we're doing. It's more just to formalize and just really put out there how we interpret it and how we're going to continue to interpret it. And hopefully, for people who aren't sure what it is, and for people who kind of just jump online, they see the name, they hear a few things, they don't bother reading anything in the lexicon, and they just kind of poo-poo on it. Hopefully it's an opportunity for them to have a look at how we view it and see if that aligns with something they want to read. And if it's not, sweet as, there's plenty of other stuff out there.
Okay, I've got two more questions to really get to the very edges of your soul and to understand your being in a very forthright and complete manner. And those are, of course, is Conan the Barbarian the greatest film ever made?
Which one?
The first one, the Arnold Schwarzenegger one
with Schwarzenegger. God, that's a good movie. Do I think it's the greatest movie ever made? No, but do I love that movie so much, and have I watched it so many times? Yes.
Now, I have to point out that the greatest movie ever made doesn't mean it's the best movie ever made. It just means it's the greatest. And secondly, sorry,
yeah.
go on.
I was just, I'm definitely I'm definitely a mood watcher. So, as you know, when you asked me what my favorite movies are, you would have seen that they were ridiculous polar opposites.
Yeah, you made that hard for me.
Cinema.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, mate. But you know, there's definitely moments where nothing will sate the interest of my brain, like Conan the Barbarian. There's times where it's got to be the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan or the first 20 minutes of Gladiator. But definitely those movies that I love, I've mentally broken them down into sections where I know something will hit that spot in me that will get my attention away from my computer or my phone for 20 or 30 or potentially an hour or two. And yeah, that movie definitely is something that I enjoy watching, but not the greatest movie of all time, I'm afraid.
Ooh. I don't know about that.
Fighting words.
I will possibly allow Event Horizon or Deep Blue Deep Blue Sea to take that title. And of course, the second question.
Event Horizon.
No, Event Horizon.
I have a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Event Horizon, is it the Warp?
No. But
no, okay,
no, it isn't. But the guy who wrote it, he had a very, very, very good conversation with him a couple of years back, and he is a massive tabletop gamer. So two of his writing credits are Event Horizon and the Mutant Chronicles film, right? And he basically didn't realize that he'd made a 40k prequel until about 7 years ago, where people started saying, hey, it's a 40k prequel. And he went, shit, it is, isn't it? Whoops.
That's super fascinating. You actually got to interview the writer. That's so cool.
I didn't interview him. We couldn't get the interview to work for various reasons.
Oh, no.
But I had a couple of chats with him. He's a really, really nice guy. I'm hoping one day time will allow us to actually sort something out. It's kind of moved off. You don't see him as much on Twitter and things these days, so it's a bit of a shame. But really, really lovely guy. But yeah, Event Horizon, it is just a phenomenal film. And did you know that the reason we've never seen an uncut version of it is because all the scenes that were cut out of it were kept in a Transylvanian tin mine which exploded.
Bullshit. Are you yanking my chain?
I'm not.
What?
I'm not kidding.
That is mental.
Yeah, there was a fire in a Transylvanian tin mine. They were keeping a load of stuff in there.
What was it doing?
It was cheap to store the film celluloid in a really cold area. It's mental, isn't it? Isn't it
what
mental?
A random fact.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
You must be excellent at trivia nights.
I wish I could do more pub quizzes these days. I used to love doing them. And of course, my second question for you is, what is the greatest D&D character you've ever played?
Okay, so I only got into D&D when the pandemic hit, and I needed a mental outlet and a connect with my friends to get out of, because Sydney was very, very locked down for a long time. And so we kicked off 5e, and that was the first time I'd ever played. So I've only ever played one D&D character, and it's a little wildling halfling sorcerer, and he is just a world of fun. And 5 years later, is one of I think 2 characters that hasn't died so far, and hasn't been replaced by other characters. So he's a chaotic, neutral world of fun who just has some of the most ridiculously amazing and ridiculously poor luck that I've ever seen with dice rolls. He's been so much fun, and he was not just him, but the whole event of doing that during lockdowns and stuff was so good for my mental health, and I'm so glad that I gave D&D a go. Yeah,
D&D's really good. RPGs are my bread and butter. I love them. Where else are you going to get somebody turn up with a gnome barbarian dressed as a jester with the name of Tiny Murder Clown, which is to this day I still have no idea how I managed to get through that with somebody just smiling at me going, I'm Tiny Murder Clown.
I just love it. I love how random and wonderful it is, and how the amount of times that you pitch a ridiculous idea to your DM, and you just see them sigh and just be like, fuck it, if you roll a 20, go for it. And then you roll a 20 and you just see their little soul crushed a bit. But then it turns out to be a really fun aspect of the game.
I'm a born GM. I have GM'd so much more than I've played, and to this day, if you can explain it to me in a way that makes scientific sense, I'll let you roll for it. That's the way I do it.
I think we once had a what do you call it, a character where the DM was having this big bad, was supposed to give us a whooping, and bring our team down and direct us to another storyline that he had ready. And then I had earlier found this random like scroll of teleport, and so and this character had this big evil spell book. It was the Necronomicon of Igorwiv or something like that. And I basically said my character like snuck up to her, jumped up on her shoulder, grabbed the book, and then wanted to teleport out there. And he goes, okay. So he's like, roll stealth, rolled it. He's like, roll what is it? Agility to jump up on the character's shoulder, rolled it. And then I could just hear him over the call. He's just going like, roll for strength to rip it out of their hands when you teleport. And then I rolled a 20, and there's just silence from him and just roars from the team. And like, it was one of the many, many times we've taken all of his plans, stomped them into the mud, and gone and done something else. So I'm assuming that people probably have done the same to you plenty of times, and I take my hat off to you for being able to DM the lunacy that is a game of D&D.
What I normally do is I introduce Gandalfini, which is, in my mind, all wizards should talk like basic American and Italian gangsters. So I made Gandalfini, who has Gandalfini's Big Book of Fun. And if anybody starts getting a bit too silly, he just turns up. What you gonna do now? It's a Gandalfini. I'm gonna come around and I'm gonna turn your house into a sheep. And it usually puts the fear of God into people. This is Gandalfi's Big Book of Fun. I'm gonna make you do some jelly fantastic. I'm aware that we are actually beyond the time that we said that we were going to go to, so I'll start wrapping things up. So, where can people find you? Where can people find the magazine? Where can people hunt you down with oversized butterfly nets if they so wish to?
Best place is to head to our website, which is just grimdarkmagazine.com. On there, you will find hundreds, well, I think we're pushing up almost at about 2,000 reviews and articles. So you'll find commentary and book recommendations large that you can probably drown in your TBR. There's a publishing page on there where you'll find nearly 35. We're about to publish our 35th issue of magazines, 3 anthologies, a collection. You'll find a novella pretty soon. So pretty much just jump on there and you'll be able to use it as a central point to access whatever you want, or you'll know what to avoid if it's not what you want.
Mm-hmm. I was actually meant to mention earlier on that one of the things that has been the strangest moment of my life was reading through an article on the website, which was the best Warhammer podcasts, and going down, we were there at number 3. It's like, what? Hang on.
It's pretty funny. That was a pretty successful article. That one that did pretty well.
That was a moment that just stopped me in my tracks, and I just went, "What? Bizarre."
Yeah, it was for that one. We went and got recommendations from a group of people, and then we just kind of went with who recommended which one the most. And that was yours was one of them. So that was definitely one where I did not listen to hundreds of hours of podcasts to make that list. I relied on the power of people, and it may have left me a bit a bit red faced.
It's just fine. I wouldn't have expected you. It was just a really weird moment. I was meant to mention it earlier on, just totally forgot. Anyhow, myself, of course, you can find the Fluffenhammer at thefluffenhammer.com. You can find us on YouTube at the Fluffenhammer. You can find us on Twitter at the Fluffenhammer. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Fluffenhammer. We have a page and a group. You know you love it. You can find me on Twitter at Grufflock. You can find my site adnickel.weebly.com, where I've got all of my art and writings and audiobooks and Mean Streets. The history of the 2D fighter is up now for download. Go download it, enjoy. I dare you. I double dare you. Also, you can download the Fall of Aramis, and if you like it, give us a quid. And with that, I think it's time to say thank you very much, Adrian. We could have probably talked for another hour here very easily.
Yeah, probably, mate. And honestly, I didn't realize you did art. I'm going to have to check that out. I love checking out artists' portfolios.
It's just, I've got a serious issue when it comes to creativity. It's like, I don't need to eat this week. I'll just draw instead. Sustain myself rather than cook chicken. Yeah, it's not healthy. I'm telling you now.
I mean, but it's how we all stay in such good shape.
Yeah, exactly. As I'm past 40 now, so I'm starting to get the 40 midriff. So maybe I should go back to drawing more so I eat less.
I think that's just the collation of knowledge has to go somewhere in your body, and unfortunately, sometimes it's around the midriff.
Yeah, I like that actually. My spare tire is just where I keep all of my soaked up knowledge.
Exactly.
So, with all that being said, thank you very much, Adrian. It's been an absolute pleasure this evening.
Yeah, look, I've had a great chat. Thank you so much. I can't believe that I almost have to start my day job. That the morning has disappeared. So thank you very much for a great conversation, mate.
No, at all, man. And hopefully we'll get you back on at some point, because I think that we could probably talk for quite some time.
Yeah, definitely. And with a bit of luck, maybe I'll be over there for one of the major cons in a year or two, and when the cost of flying out of Australia doesn't involve sacrificing your monthly paycheck. So maybe we can do it over a pint at some point.
That would be rather good. Yeah. I'll be up for that. Absolutely up for that. So, with all that being said, we shall get out of here. Thank you very much to you guys at home for listening, if indeed you still are. Good night!